doing Parshas Pinchas, page 876. Hello. So it begins by Adaber Hashem al Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Pinchas the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron HaKohen, Hashi v'Chmasi. He stopped my being anger against the Jewish people by him being zealous. So what is it talking about? It's coming from the end of last week's Parsha. The end of last week's Parsha, the story is as follows. You have Bilam. Bilam tries to curse the Jews, and no matter what happens, he's not able to curse the Jews. All he can do is bless the Jews. But he's being paid to curse the Jews. So he tells Balak, who hired him, right? He's like a hitman, right? So he's hired by Balak, and Balak says, listen, if you want to get the Jews, there's only one way. You have to make their God angry, because as long as their God is not angry with them, he's going to guard them. So you have to make him angry, and then we can curse the Jews. So how do you do that? Their God hates immorality, right? He hates it when someone is immoral, especially with sexuality. He says, what we're going to do is you come up with a way to cause the Jewish people to sin in this way, and then Hashem will let you curse them. So Balak, who is the head of, this time, of Midian, he goes and he takes some of the women from Midian, the daughters, and he gets them to have relations with the Jewish men, to trick them in. It says in the Medrash that everybody was camped, and the men went to the market to buy things for their families, like clothes or food or whatever, and they go to the market, and they had all these tents, these older women selling things. So the men aren't afraid to be the older women. The older women aren't going to, try to have relations with them. So they would go and they'd say, okay, you want to buy this piece of cloth? So come on inside the tent where it's cool, and we'll talk about it. We'll negotiate, right? That's how they did business. So they would go inside. When they went inside, there would be a very young, beautiful woman inside who would try to seduce the men, and often they would. But right before they'd get the man to do what they wanted, and the man's all, he's not himself. So they say, one second, it's our custom before we do this that we thank our idol, our God. So, it's no big deal. Just thank God. Thank our God, if you don't mind. Excuse me. So the men aren't thinking straight, and they do, right? So now what have the men done? They have illicit relations, right, which they shouldn't be doing. Plus, they worshiped an idol. So now God's pretty upset, right? So Bilam caused this to happen, and because it's this bad, so Hashem made a plague, and then people are dying because of the plague. And then it comes to a head at the end. What happens now is that so many men are involved with doing this that they want to make a statement. They have a pride parade, their own parade, right? And they send a man who's a prince, one of the leaders of the Jewish people. He has his own Midianite girlfriend now, and he wants to have relations with her right in front of everybody, right in front of Moshe, to show him, you can't tell me what to do. I can do whatever I want. So he takes her right inside of the courtroom, right by the temple, and he has relations with her. And like everybody's shocked. Imagine right there in public in front of all of these people is having relations with this woman. So they don't know what to do. Like they're frozen. So this fellow Pinchas, right? Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, he jumps up and he grabs a spear and he kills them both. And it says that as soon as he did this, the plague ended. And that's where we begin. It says that Hashem says, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, made it so I'm no longer angry against the Jewish people by his being a zealot. Right? And because of it, I am no longer angry with the Jewish people, and I'm going to give him my covenant of peace. That's what it says. Now, a number of things to look into here. First is that Hashem says to tell the Jewish people this story of Pinchas. And Pinchas really stopped the plague by killing these two people. So it says that Pinchas was a zealot. And the law says that a zealot in such a situation is allowed to kill someone. Because normally you're not allowed to kill someone for having relations. It's not an offense that's worthy of death, right? Because someone had relations with a man with another woman. A married woman is something else, but just with another woman, and yet he kills him. And he kills him because of the fact of what he was doing. He's doing it in public in front of everyone to show everyone you can do what you want. You don't have to listen to Moshe. You don't have to listen to God. You do whatever you want. And so he felt it was necessary, and he did it, and it was right. So there's a number of questions that come up. First thing is we have to ask, why do they introduce Pinchas in such a funny way? Usually you say a person's name is Pinchas ben Elazar, Pinchas the son of Elazar. But here it says he's the son of Elazar and the son of Aaron. He's the son of Elazar and the grandson of Aaron. So why does it tell you that? Because that's pretty rare that it tells you that. The next thing it says is that he turns back the anger of God, and it says, and I'm going to give him my covenant of peace. Now that's a funny thing to give somebody. Here a guy goes and he commits this violent act. Okay, it's justified. You're allowed to do it. But he takes a spear and he kills 2 people right in front of everybody. And God says, I'm going to give you a reward. I'm going to give you peace. Well, why the silly? Not silly, but so odd. It's out of place. Give him the award for being the great military leader, for being the great zealot. But the award for peace, what peace did he do? He didn't do peace. He killed people. That's not peace. That's war, right? You don't kill people. It's not peace. So what does that mean? So the first thing that comes up with the names, Rashi tells us. He says, why is he referred to by his father and his grandfather? And it says because it says here, Rashi says, Lefi shayu hashvatim mivazim oso, because the other tribes used to make fun of Pinchas. Why? Vayrisem ben puti zeh shepitam avi imo agalim levodas achavim b'harig nasi shavet miYisrael. Because look at this guy, Pinchas. Who is he? His grandfather used to fatten cows for idol worship. And his grandfather was an idol worshiper. And he's going and he kills a prince. But you can imagine, like today, today you have certain people who have a lot of connections, they're very powerful. And even if they do something wrong, you think twice before you do anything about it, because what they do to you could be much worse, right? Imagine if you see a mafia guy and he steals, you see him steal or beat up somebody, right? So if you go to the police and tell, you can be pretty sure he's going to try to kill you to stop you from doing that, right? So who are you going to go and do such a thing? Not necessarily. Now, how about if he wasn't a mafia guy, but he was a very powerful, let's say, city councilman, and you see him do something wrong? Now, that city councilman can send the police after you. He can say, all kinds of things about you, and then you're not going to accomplish anything. So, should you do it? So, of course, the right thing is to do it, to turn someone in when they do something wrong. But in this case, you can see why somebody would hesitate. You'd always hesitate because you're not going to, you think, what am I going to do? I'm going to turn them in, I'm going to get caught, they're going to find out it's me, I'm not going to, nothing will change, and I'll just get in trouble. So I'm not going to do it. So here Pinchas, his grandfather was an idol worshiper, and he goes and he kills this prince, a prince, right? Like the vice president, right? The prince of a tribe. He goes and kills him. And everyone says, who's this guy? He goes and kills the prince. He's just his grandfather did avodah zarah. He was an idol worshiper. Why would we, who is he to do this? Right? That's one thing that they would ask, and they'd make fun of him. So it tells you here that he's the son of Elazar. Now Elazar had a mother and a father. So Elazar's mother was the sister of Moshe's wife. And she was and her father was Yisro, who was an idol worshiper. So it's true. Pinchas' grandfather was an idol worshiper. However, he has 2 grandfathers, and the other grandfather was Aaron HaKohen. Aaron, the great Aaron, the brother of Moshe, he was a very peaceful person. He was just the opposite, right? Pagans who worship idols are violent people. They don't think about life in the same way we do. But Aaron was a very special, extraordinary, righteous person. The world depended on such a man. So what they're telling you here is the people are saying, look at this guy Pinchas, right? He goes out there and he kills this guy. You know why he killed him? Because he's bloodthirsty. Because his grandfather was a pagan. His grandfather killed people. His grandfather didn't care. Life wasn't important to him. So it's not because he's such a righteous guy, this Pinchas. It's because he's bloodthirsty. He's just looking to fight somebody. So the Torah comes and tells you that's not true. They come to tell you that, yeah, sure, his one grandfather was a pagan, but his other grandfather was Aaron. And Aaron was just the opposite. Aaron considered human life and human dignity very, very important. So don't go telling us that that's the case. So the Torah adds the other grandfather, the grandfather Aaron, to say, you want to know what Pinchas was like? He was like Aaron. But we know he wasn't like Aaron. I mean, even though it says that, Aaron was a peaceful man, and Pinchas killed 2 people. Excuse me. He kills these 2 people. Right? If he was a peaceful guy, he just couldn't do it. Somebody else would do it. Why would, he jumps up, he's the first one, he goes and does it. He's so peaceful like Aaron. So it comes to tell you, Aaron was known as an Ohev Shalom and a Rodeh Shalom. Aaron loved peace. Ohev Shalom, loves peace. And Rodeh Shalom. Rodeh Shalom means he ran after peace. I mean, he used to, like he would, it says in the Talmud that he used to trick people. Let's say if 2 people are fighting with each other, they don't get along. So Aaron would go to one of them and say, this other fellow that you're arguing with, he confided in me that he realizes he's wrong, but his ego won't let him give in. He just can't do it. So I'm telling you, if you go to him and apologize, he will tell you it's his fault and he's sorry, he doesn't mean anything. But if you just make the first step, the fight will be over. That's nice. Then he goes the other guy, he does the same thing. Tells him the same story. So now both guys think that the other guy feels it's his fault. So they both go to each other and they say they're sorry, and they both say it's my fault. And everybody's happy and it's over. That's called a Rodeh Shalom. He runs after peace. He would do things to cause peace. It wasn't enough for him just that he liked peace, but he caused people to be at peace. So, but the word Rodef usually is not used in such a way. When we use the word Rodef in the Torah, it means a murderer. A Rodef is, it tells a story, if you see somebody chasing another person and they're going to kill him, so you're obligated to stop him, to kill that person, even to kill that person who's trying to kill the other one. Right? So if a murderer is running after someone, after his victim, and he's trying to catch him to kill him, and you see it, you're obligated to kill the murderer before he can kill the other person. That's an obligation. And the person who's the murderer is called a rodef, means a pursuer, a runner after. Just like Aaron ran after peace, this person runs after people to kill them. So the word rodef is usually used as somebody who's running after something to kill him. It's negative. But they use it with Aaron in a positive, that he was running after peace. So it applies very much here. Because here, Pinchas ran after peace. Why is it peace? Sometimes we have to learn that you have to fight to have peace. Sometimes you're dealing with people that just trying to make peace, like Aaron originally did, where you just talk to people, it doesn't work. Sometimes people just won't do it. We know in our own lives, you see it, that there are occasions where somebody just wants to fight. That's what they want. They want to have an argument. They want to have a fight. They want to do something to hurt somebody else. And no matter what you do to reason with them, you can't change it. Sometimes you have to fight to stop a fight. Right? Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to go to war to make peace. And that's the idea of Rodeh Shalom, running after peace, like a murderer runs after murder, because sometimes you have to be violent in order to have peace. And that's the message is telling us here, that Pinchas was violent. He murdered 2 people with a sword in front of the whole nation. But he did it because he wanted peace. He did it because God was upset with the Jewish people. There was no peace between the Jews and God. God made a plague. People were dying because of this. So Pinchas stopped it. And because he stopped it, then from that point on, the God stopped the plague, and he stopped them from doing what they were doing, and therefore he was the one who caused the peace through that violent act. That's why it says at the end that God says, what am I going to give Pinchas? I'm going to give him a covenant of peace. Now that's a funny thing to give him, right? Because even though what he did caused peace, he did a violent thing. And there's a rule. The Talmud says this rule, but we know it's human nature. When a person does something, and you do something once, you do it a few times, it doesn't bother you to do it anymore. For instance, we say if your person sins, the first time you sin, you feel terrible about it. The second time, not so terrible. By the third time already, it was a good thing. Right? We get used to it. You go a doctor. When you're a person studying to be a doctor, they go to medical school. The first time they got to cut open somebody, they'll pass out, they get sick. They don't like it, right? I mean, it's a human being you're cutting open. After the 100th or 200th operation they do, they don't even think about it anymore. Are they cruel? No, they're not cruel. They just get used to it, right? That's how we are. We get used to things. That's how human beings are created. When a person is violent, right, violence becomes easy for them. It's not so hard. The first, you go to a war, the first time you have to shoot somebody, it's really hard. You do it 50 times, they don't think anything about it. It's like that in everything, not just violence, but everything. You get used to things. A shochet. I remember going when I was studying to be a rabbi, they took us to a slaughterhouse where they did kosher slaughtering. So you have this guy there, he's slaughtering the animals, he's talking about everything, it's normal. Me, I walk in, I see him slaughter an animal, I thought I was going to die. I couldn't believe it was so sick to see, to watch somebody do that. So, truth is that the first time this guy did it, he felt the same as me. I wasn't special. Anybody, you see an animal like that, I'm sorry for coughing so much. Thank you. Somebody coughs so much, then coughs so much. That's me. If somebody does so much violence, they become violent. So God says, what you did, I'm going to give you a special blessing. You're going to do this violent thing, but you're not going to become violent. I'm going to give you a blessing of peace, that you should always have peace, so that you should not get used to killing. That was a special blessing he gave them. Now, if you look at that word shalom here, you'll see there's a dot above the third letter, the vav. And the reason is, it tells you at the beginning of the sentence, it says vav katia. Vav katia means that the vav itself is cut in half. And if you look in the actual Torah, you'll see that there's a little line and a space and a little line above it. It's like someone took the letter vav, which is a line, and they've sliced it. And there's a little space there, so you see it. So the commentaries will want to know, why did God say that you have to have a slice in that letter vav, right, in this word peace? So it's reminiscent of a story. And the story is that it says that when, that we say in our prayers, Oseh Shalom B'Milmav, he who makes peace in heaven, Oseh Shalom Aleinu, you should make peace for us, thank you, and for all the Jewish people. Right? We say that in our prayers. He who makes peace in heaven, what does that mean? Who's he making peace with in heaven? We're here. So who's God making? He who makes peace in heaven should make peace with us. What does that mean? What is it? Well, we say it every day, 3 times a day. Well, who is there to make peace with in heaven? There's nobody to make peace with in heaven. They're all dead. There's nobody there. So the answer is that it reminds us of what is heaven. The word heaven in Hebrew is shamayim. Shamayim is a conjunction of 2 words, right? It's right. You put 2 words together, you have a 3rd word. The 2 words are Eish and Mayim. Eish, Mayim, Shamayim. It's put the 2 words together. Why? Because in heaven, God took fire and water, and He made it so they could live together. They could cohabitate, and that created the heaven. So you can have heat, you can have cold, you have snow, you have hot, you have all kinds of things coming in from there. Why? Because God made it that fire and water can exist. Here, fire will evaporate water, water will put out fire. You can't have fire and water together. It doesn't work. But in heaven, you can. So just like God took 2 different things, like heaven and fire and water, and put them in heaven, and He made peace between fire and water, so too, God, you should make peace between me and the other people. The people of the world should have peace. That's what it really means. And that's what it's referring to here. Because it's showing that this split between up and down, but the heavens and the earth, is to show that just like God made peace in the heaven of 2 different things, so too He should make peace on earth between 2 like things, between people who are similar. And that's what it's referring to. There's the peace that He made, right, that was really a special peace that God gave a blessing to Pinchas because he was violent. And here it shows you that his violence was for the sake of peace. That's why he gets that blessing. So this, of course, it goes on and it tells you a bit more about what happened. Right, and that God then says that you should go and you should harass the Midianites, you should do things to harm them because of what they did to you, and they do. And then it goes on, and we go into what's called accounting. We have going into AM 879 and 881. It goes through accounting, just like we did at the beginning of the book of Numbers of BaMidbar, where they count all of the people. right? The difference in the two counting is that counting before was a counting of all the people who were in the desert, who they came out of Egypt and lived in the desert. This counting are the people who are going to enter Israel, which is the people who left Egypt that didn't enter Israel. Only their children did. So this is the next one. Now, there's a couple of interesting things here that strike one. For instance, if you look at the sons of, if you look on page 883, it says, line 38, it says, the sons of Benjamin, according to their families. The end of the paragraph, it tells you how many people there were. There's 45,600. That's how many people in the tribe of Benjamin that there was. The next one after it, Dan, the family of Dan, starting on line 42, tells you on the next line, right, and all of the families were 64,400. So there's 20,000 more people in the family of Dan than there is in the family of Benjamin, right? Now, this is before they go into Israel, after they've left Egypt. Now, we know Jacob and his sons went down to Egypt. He had all of these sons. One was Benjamin, one was Dan. We know Benjamin had 10 sons. He had 10 sons. And we know that from other places. We know that Dan had one son. Not only did he have one son, but that son was deaf and dumb. He had disabilities. So you'd say, well, if Dan has one son, right? One son is all he has. Right? He's not going to have so many children. There's not going to be so many children. Who's going to marry a guy like that who's deaf and dumb? Right? And then if you marry him, so how many children could he have? And then how many children could they have? It's not that long between the time they left that Dan was alive and the time that we're talking about here. Right? So how many children could they have? Compare that to Benjamin. That Benjamin had 10 sons, all healthy ones. So he should have a lot more kids, right? Benjamin should be much larger than Dan. But here we see that Dan is larger by 20,000 people than Benjamin is. So it tells us a very important point. The logic says you have a nice big family, you're going to have lots of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, it's going to be a big nation. And logic also says that if you're not so fortunate to have a lot of children, or you have children with disabilities, and you say, what's going to be of them? What's going to happen to the future, right? So what we find out from this is that it's not all up to us. That Hashem plays a role, and he puts his hand in, and he says, you might think, logic says, that you have one child who has problems coming from this family, you have 10 healthy sons coming from this family, that the ones with 10 healthy sons should be a much bigger, powerful family, and it's not. Because everything is not based totally on the idea of logic and of this world. The role of God, the role of the spiritual world is very important. And here we see that happening. So when people say, who's going to marry such a guy? What's going to come of this family? It's really not, it's something that as a parent, you feel bad for your children if they have trouble getting married or they're not married or there's something wrong with them when they're young and then you're afraid that's what's going to become of them as adults. So you do the best you can. You put all your effort in it. But in the end, we have to know that God plays a role. And we see it very clearly here, that there's one family that had one little kid. They became so powerful while the other one wasn't. That just shows you a difference. We then have a couple of very interesting things that go on here. Let's see which one's first. We have here on page 887, the daughters of Slafkan. Right in the beginning there, the first line. Who are they? The daughters of Slafkan. So there's a fellow named Slafkan. He didn't have any sons. He only had daughters. And he died in the desert. Well, there's speculation that he died for a number of reasons, but he didn't die with Korach. He wasn't part of the rebellion of Korach. He died for some other reason. And now there's a problem. The problem is he has no sons. He has only daughters. And according to what we've learned so far, the inheritance of a man goes to his sons. His sons have to support his daughters, right? They're responsible to take care of the daughters, but the daughters don't inherit. So one of the things that we learned that we inherit is a portion of the land of Israel. the Jews were leaving Egypt to go to Israel, God apportioned each tribe a certain amount of land, and each person a certain amount of land. So when you got there, you got your land. But it went from father to son. This man has no sons. So the girls, they go to Moshe, right? Everyone thinks Jewish women are so quiet, right? And they let you push them around. So here's a good example. Watch this. So it says, they give the daughters of Slavchad, and they stood before Moshe, before Elazar the Kohen, and before the leaders in the entire assembly, right? They stand up in front of all of the Jewish people, and they say, our father died in the wilderness, but he was not among the assembly that was gathering against Hashem with Korach, like I told you. But he died of his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be omitted from among his family, because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. Right? They went and they said, what's wrong with us? Right? Our father had no sons, so what? We're going to have nowhere to live now? We should inherit. Right? You only said the sons inherit. But what if there are no sons? Right? This is the beginning of time, right? The Torah was just given. So they want an answer. They go to Moshe and they say, listen, you can't push us around. We have a father. The father died. He had all this land. What are we supposed to do now? So we want land also. We want a piece of the land of Israel. So Moshe doesn't know the answer. It says Moshe brought their claim before Hashem. He goes to Hashem. So Hashem tells him, the daughters of Slavchad are right. You should give them they should give them the inheritance of their father. And he does. They inherited their father's land. So the daughters do inherit. That's where we learn it from. But there's a number of important points here, besides the fact that we learn that when people say how Jewish women, religious Jewish women especially, are meek, right? This is a perfect example, and I can't give you an example the other way, because every example is like this, where Jewish women, they get their point across. And truthfully, we're going to see something about them that stands out, that makes them very special. We just finished the story of Shlach, of the story of the spies, where the Jewish people send spies into Israel. They come back with a terrible story, how terrible Israel is. You don't want to go there. They're going to kill you. It's not what you thought it would be. It's a very barren place. It's a very difficult place. Then everybody gets all upset, and God says, He's going to punish them for doing this. And then here you have a parsha just a few weeks later, not much longer in history. These daughters, right, their father dies, and they want to inherit their father's land in the land of Israel. Everyone else is afraid to go to Israel because it's terrible. These girls are saying, oh no, we want to go to Israel and we want the land. So here you have these women who understand the significance of the land of Israel. They understand that Hashem promised it to us, so we're going to get it. They understood it, and they weren't ready to give it up. While the men, right, as we saw a few weeks ago, as soon as someone told them, hey, it's not going to be so easy, they give up. But the women, they had a love for Israel because God promised it to them. Here we find one of many examples of how Jewish women have a natural grounding and tie to whatever Hashem says, where the men are constantly have to be reminded all the time. They constantly have to be involved, and they're constantly having problems. Here we have another example of the women who don't. Sorry. An earlier example is with the golden calf. If you remember the golden calf. The golden calf, Moshe's not back on time. He doesn't come down, and they're afraid that he's dead, and that there'll be nobody to lead them to Israel. They decide they're going to worship an idol, right? So what do? They need gold. So Aaron says, you want to make an idol out of gold, you got to get gold. Bring me gold. So Aaron thinks he's going to stop them, right? It's not going to happen. The men go to the wise and say, give us your earrings, give us your bracelets, we're going to go save us. We're going to die in the desert. We need to make an idol. The women said, forget it. What are you, crazy? We're going to give you our gold and our silver to make an idol? God told us, wait here, Moshe's coming. We're waiting. We're not going to worship an idol because he's 5 minutes late. Right? The women wouldn't do it. The men are all excited. Oh, what's going to be? They don't know what to do with themselves. The women say, God promised it. This is going to happen. We're not giving you. So maybe you want to say the women are just stingy. So then later on, when we're building the Mishkan, the temple in the desert, it says that they were asking for all different things for people to give. So the women came forward and said, we want to contribute. Well, what do you want to give? Well, we want to give these beautiful mirrors that we have. These are mirrors that they used. And they made from copper. They were quite expensive. And here you see that when it came for something good, they wanted to give. They went out of their way to give. They persuaded Moshe to let them give. Moshe didn't want to take it. And God told them, yes, you should take this. So here you see, in a case where the people are doing something wrong, the women say, forget it, we're not giving you our jewelry. In a case where they're doing something right, the women come forward and say, we want to give our jewelry. So they're certainly not stingy. They know the difference between right and wrong, and the men don't seem to. And in this case, with Slavkan's daughters, they also know the difference. They say, God promises the land of Israel, we're going to the land of Israel. The men say, oh, we're afraid? Too bad. The daughters say, we want our land. So that's what it tells us here. That's the story of the daughters of Slavkan. Now, we have here on 889, and Moshe, God is basically preparing Moshe to die. He's telling him, you're about to enter the land of Israel. I want you to go up on this mountain, and I want you to see the land of Israel. Go look at it. And then you're going to be gathered under your people. And then you're going to die. He doesn't die for a while yet, but right here is what God tells him. So a number of problems with this. First thing is, God tells Moshe, first he tells him before, you're going to lead the Jewish people to Israel. Then Moshe makes a mistake, so he tells him, no, you can't. You can't go to Israel. You're going to die in the desert. And Moses pleads with him, I want to go to Israel. You promised us Israel. It's the land for the Jewish people. It's the Holy Land. I want to go there. God says, you can't go. You can't. So Moses, what's he going to do? He cries, he prays, he does everything he can. God doesn't change his mind. So now God says, okay, I'm going to be good on my word. You're going to die in the desert. Get ready. It's going to happen soon. In the meantime, I want you to go up on this mountain and go look at the land of Israel. That's a pretty mean thing to do. And here he is, his whole life, he's been dedicating himself to leading the Jewish people to Israel. He makes a mistake. He's punished, he can't go to the land of Israel. Alright, so finally he accepts it. So what does God do? He brings him up on the mountain and he says, ha ha, look at, there it is, you can't go. Doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do. How could that be that God does that? That God's so cruel that he would do that? That's a cruel thing to do. You have your kid wants a new toy, like let's say a new truck, a toy truck, and you say, I'm sorry, I can't give you a toy truck. And then you go and you take him to the toy store and you say, look at that toy truck, I'm not giving it to you. Like, that's just mean. That's what God does. It's just mean. So what's the purpose of this? So there's something that's important that we have to understand. We've talked about it before. There's a concept called Maisa Avos Simon Lebanim. The actions of our forefathers are a sign to us that what our forefathers did way back then, they do it with us in mind, that we should learn from how they acted. When God tells Moshe to go and look at the land of Israel, he knew Moshe wasn't going to be able to go, and Moshe knew he wasn't going to go, and he wasn't being cruel. But he wanted that Moshe should look at the land of Israel and feel that he's not going, to actually see it and not be able to go. Because throughout history, we've had Jews who've wanted to go to the land of Israel and we couldn't go. For thousands of years, Jews cried that they couldn't go to Israel. Right? Jews tried to walk from all over Europe to go to Israel. Jews took up boats. They did all kinds of things in order to get to the land of Israel, and many, many didn't make it. And many tried. So the desire for a Jew to want to go to Israel, even though they can't go to Israel, is something that's been implanted in us throughout history. And it comes from this story. That's where it comes from. Why would it be that a Jew who's born in Russia, whose parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, going back 20 generations were born in Russia, should want to suddenly leave this country and go to Israel? Where would that come from? Want to go to Israel? It comes from this story. Because Moshe went, he wanted to go to Israel and he couldn't go, and he felt that feeling within his soul when he looked at it. So too we feel that today. We feel that same feeling. Why is it that you have Jews, right? They seem to have no touch to Judaism. They have nothing to do with being Jewish. They suddenly want to move to Israel. they want to go to Israel. Or you have a Jew with no relationship to anything Jewish, they go to Israel, suddenly they change. Right? It's like, people who say, well, I went to the Kosel and it changed me. Well, what does that mean? You looked at a wall, it changed you. How does the wall change you? Because of this story, that Moshe's desire, his longing, his love of the land of Israel became something for us. Right? Because this happened to him, it affects us today in a spiritual way, so that we also want to go to the land of Israel. We also try, and Jews throughout history did. That's what we get from there. But then it goes on, and Moshe is put pretty clearly, you're not going to the land of Israel. It's time for you to pick someone to take over. Right? As he tells him. So here, Moshe says to God, may Hashem, God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the assembly. Pick somebody after me. I'm going to die, you said. So who's going to be next? Who shall go out before them and come in before them? Who's going to take them out and bring them in? Who's going to lead them like a shepherd leads sheep? So Hashem says, take to yourself Yoshua the son of Nun, Joshua. God tells him Joshua is the one who's going to do it. So why now? Moshe's known he's going to die and not go to the land of Israel. He knows it. It's not today. He doesn't find out today. He's known this a long time. God already told him, you didn't do something right. You did something wrong. You can't go. He knew he wasn't going. He also, even if he would go, he knew he was going to die. Somebody has to take over. How come he waits till now? Doesn't he pick somebody in advance? Now he says, God says, okay, who you pick? I don't know. You pick. Right? What do you mean? I'm giving you the power to find somebody to take over for you. Do it. He didn't do it. The truth is, he did it. The commentaries in the Midrash say that he actually picked Pinchas was the one. But because of who Pinchas was, which we didn't realize until this week, that he was a zealot who killed someone, he couldn't be the leader of the Jewish people. They said, well, why not? What he did was nothing wrong with it. God blesses him for it. God makes him a Kohen because of it. So why would that be a bad thing? So the answer is right here in the same line. It says in 15, Moshe says to Hashem, may Hashem, God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the assembly. What does he mean, God of the spirits of all flesh? What kind of a statement is that? Where do you ever hear God referred to in such a way? This is a unique statement that he calls him this. And the reason is as follows, is that God creates people, and he doesn't create any two people the same. The Talmud says, just like everybody's face is different, everybody thinks differently, everybody feels differently. No two people are really the same. He says, and a Jewish leader has to be able to relate to every Jew. It could be a logical Jew, it could be a nudnik, it could be any kind of a person that you come in contact with. You have to be able to tolerate him. You have to be able to deal with them. If you really care for people, you have to deal with the difficult ones too. You have to deal with the strange ones too, the odd ones too. Right? And in every community you have people who are different, and you have some who are odd, some who are very needy, some who are ill. Right? And if you want to be the leader of that community, you got to be prepared to love them just like you love the others, and to care for them like you care for the others. If you can't do that, it doesn't make you bad. You're just not the right one to lead the community. If you want to be it, then it's got to be just like here. God is the master of all flesh. God is He's the leader of every kind of person. And therefore, God, since you're like that, you have to tell me who's like that. Because I thought Pinchas was that way, Moshe says. But I see because Pinchas killed those two people, that was his way of showing he can't tolerate that. In other words, some people, they see something bad happen, they can say, all right, that's how it is. Other people see something bad happen, I can't handle it. It's got to stop, right? Pinchas said, I can't handle it. It's got to stop. Moshe would say, I got to fix it, but let's do it in a nice way, and let's take our time, and let's not embarrass anybody. And this is just a little mishigas this guy has. It's not such a big deal. So Moshe, as the leader of all of the people, understood the foibles, so to speak, the flaws, the idiosyncrasies, the silly things about people. Pinchas didn't. Doesn't make him bad, just different personality. So when God tells him, pick a person, Moshe realizes the one I picked is wrong. It can't be Pinchas. It's got to be someone else. So so he says to God, you know about all the different kinds of people. You know who has the ability to deal with all those people. You tell me who should it be? So he tells them it should be Yeshua, because Yeshua, who was a student of Moshe's, was the one who really is the best in being able to see all the different kind of people and to deal with them. So that's why it says it here, and that's why Yeshua is picked at this point. We next go to the last section here as a section of the sacrifices, beginning at 891. This section is probably the most often read section of the Torah, because every time you have a holiday and you have to read a special reading, it comes from here. Because these are the sacrifices for all the holidays, all the special occasions. So that's in this part of the Torah. It's found right here. So for instance, there's always a trick. When you learn this, either if you're a Torah reader or a Torah seller or a rabbi, which is when somebody wants to buy a Torah and donate it to you, though often to make a new Torah is very expensive. Sometimes you'll buy a used one from a synagogue that's closing, let's say. It's cheaper, but you want to make sure it's in good shape. So one of the first things you do is you open it up to this parsha, and if this parsha looks good, then the Torah is probably good, because this part of the Torah is read more than any other part. So therefore, if there's a part's going to wear out, it's going to be this part. If this isn't worn out, then chances are the rest isn't. You still have to check it, but at least you know if you walk into a room and there's 20 Torahs, you say, okay, open them all to this parsha and let me see it. Then you can pretty quickly see which ones you won't take. Then from the ones that are left, then you just have to look further. So that's there. Now, one of the interesting things here, it talks about all different sacrifices. One of them is the Olas HaTamid, which is the daily regular sacrifice. I'll have to find exactly where it is, because there's a lot of sacrifices in here.
First one.
What?
It's in the very beginning.
The first one?
28.
Yeah, looks like that. But there's a specific section that I wanted to get to, talking about it. Maybe I won't find it offhand, but I'll tell it to you. So it talks about the sacrifice, which is the daily sacrifice. It's given every single day. Right? There are certain sacrifices. You have a sacrifice for Pesach, a sacrifice for Sukkot, a sacrifice for Rosh Chodesh. You have a sacrifice every day, right? Every single day. So that sacrifice, right? You can imagine that sacrifice, you do it every single day. That's it is in the beginning. You're right, because I missed the line. So you see the whole section here, beginning on section 28 on page 891. It talks about this is the fire offering that you are to offer. It tells you how to do it. And then right in the middle, verse 6, it is the continuing elevation offering that was done at Mount Sinai. Right here it tells you you should do this, and you should do this, you should do this, this is the animal, this is how you kill it, this is how you use it to fulfill the sacrifice every day. And right in the middle of this whole discussion it says, and this is the sacrifices given on Mount Sinai. Right? It's like in the middle of a description, like, you go out and you buy a new DVD player, and it says, okay, now to make it work, you plug it in, and then you got to program it this way and that way, then you got to press this button. Now, before it goes to the next step, it says, and this DVD player was made in Japan. And then it goes to the next thing. Now press this button, and then press this button. What has it got to do with the fact that it's made in Japan? It has to be in the middle of the directions. What's it there? It should be at the beginning, at the end. But why the middle of the direction? I'm trying to figure out how to make it work, and you're telling me where it comes from. It's got nothing to do with it. And that's what's here. Here, God's telling you, you should have the sacrifice. It has to be made this way and not that way. It has to be used this way and that way, like it was done on Mount Sinai. And then it has to be this way and then that way, and then over here and over there. What does Mount Sinai have to do with it? So there's a very interesting message. There's a legal answer, but there's also a philosophic answer. And philosophically, when a person does something every day, it becomes sort of old. It's the same thing every day. First time you do it, maybe it's exciting, but every day it gets to be a little bit boring. So it's important when it comes to mitzvahs, and it comes to relationships, it comes to many things in our lives, we can't allow them to become boring. We can't allow them to become stale, become old. The Torah tells us here that that's very important, that you have to make sure things stay fresh. And here in the middle of this, you have the sacrifice offer every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every day. Shabbos, every day you offer the sacrifice. then suddenly, it has this thing about Mount Sinai. Why? Because when was the first time this was offered? On Mount Sinai. The first time this sacrifice was given then. How did you feel then? The first time you ever gave a sacrifice? That was exciting. First time? Now you've done it 1,000 times. Exciting? No. So he's telling you, putting in the middle here to say, you're going to do this 1,000,000 times. It should always be as exciting as it was the first time. That's what's important. So, I get up every day, I put my tefillin on, and I pray here in shul with my tefillin on. I look, at my son, when he was 13, I see him put his tefillin on the first time. Right? It's a big deal. He puts on his tefillin, and they're real shiny, and he puts them on exactly spaced. Everything is exact space in between them. It's perfectly straight. Right? It takes him like 10 minutes to put on his tefillin. It takes me like 40 seconds. Right? But why? Because it's his first time, and it's so meaningful to him. It's so important. And I say to myself, I've done this so many times. I should still feel this way. I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm doing the will of God, and it's important. And nothing should become old. It should always be fresh. It always have meaning to me. So I have to grow and learn in order for that to happen. That's what it's telling us here. Be it with a mitzvah, be it the relationship. I would say, in my experience, the most common reason people have troubles in marriages and even split up is because they get bored with each other. They lose each other. They end up like two ships passing in the night. They're like, at first they're going to build this wonderful family and do all these things, and they are. And then this one gets this interest, and this one's this interest, so this one starts working, and that one starts working, and then the kids get older, and suddenly you realize you have nothing in common anymore. After all these years, you've gone off and done your thing, you've done your thing, and the kids kept you together. The future kept you together. Well, the future is pretty much come. The kids are gone. What's keeping us together? I'm out doing this, you're out doing this, we've grown apart. The idea is that that's going to happen with everything in our lives. We're going to get used to everything. Unless, we work to keep it fresh, like the first time. The only way you can do that is by growing, by learning, by growing, by putting in an effort. When it comes to a mitzvah, it's a matter of learning more about the mitzvah, and every time you learn more, it's new. In case of a relationship, it's by being conscious of it, by thinking about it, realizing I could be married a month, I could be married 50 years. I could ask the Wallmans. They were married 60 years. I didn't ask them this question, but if I asked them, I'm sure the answer would be something like this, which is, you want to be married for 60 years and still feel like you're married for a week? Is that you have to work at it. It makes no difference if you're married 20 years, 60 years, 20 days. You have to work at your marriage. You have to think of the other person. You have to make it fresh. You have to be spontaneous sometimes. You have to do things different. You want it to be real. Otherwise, after a while, you're just doing the same thing day in and day out. You don't think about each other. Nothing's the same. And then one day you wake up and you say, we're not the same anymore. Like, what kind of life do I have? I don't need this kind of life. And the marriage falls apart. The Torah is telling you here that's going to happen in everything we do, unless we keep it fresh. And that takes effort. That we have to work at. So it's telling it with mitzvahs, it's telling us with life, it's telling us with marriage, telling us with work, with everything. You have to always try to keep things fresh. That's one of the meanings of what it's telling us in that part of the parsha.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I understand what you mean about marriage, but it's obvious you could do things, right, for each other, right? When we're talking about like prayers and stuff that every day, how do you keep that fresh?
Prayers are easier, much easier than marriage. Prayer is our prayers that we have are written by prophets, people with amazing abilities. Every word we say has many, many meanings. If you take the time to open a book about prayer, I don't mean you in particular, anybody, right? I'm not picking at you because you asked the question. Person opens up a book about prayer, and you read something about a prayer that you say every day, and you learn something new. So when you go to say that prayer, you're going to think about that new thing. It's refreshed now. It's got a new meaning, a new addition to it. If you do that regularly, you'll always find things. You're never going to come to the end of all the meanings in our prayers. And we certainly have a lot of prayers. So if you open up these books and you do it, it stays fresh. That's the idea. If prayer is an obligation, I rush in the middle of the day from work, I say my prayers. My mind is still at work. As soon as I leave, I go back to work. Then you prayed legally, but you didn't pray emotionally, right? Nothing really happened. But by keeping it fresh, by learning something new, gaining something from it, it makes a world of difference. So one of the classes that we give here during Musaf, during the Musaf service, the second part of the service on Shabbos morning, I've never been an advocate to make these classes at all. I find that people come to shul, they come to pray. And when we're done praying, then you can go take a class. To take a class instead of pray is, in my opinion, is usually not the best thing to do. But one of the classes that we have at that time, the reason that I think it's okay is because one of those classes is about prayer. So that if you're praying every day and you don't have the ability to learn on your own, you go to a class on prayer and it teaches you a new meaning for prayer. The next 6 weeks you pray, you're going to have more meaning. You go to the next class, you'll do it again. So that's really the answer. The answer is you think about it. Relationships need one type of thing. Mitzvahs need another. But mostly it's being conscious. If you're conscious of it, you're thinking about it, you'll come up with meanings and it'll say more to you. Right? Well, so that pretty much takes us to the end of Parshas Pinchas with all of the various sacrifices. Next week we read Parshas Matos. We're entering next week into what's called the 3 weeks, the period of 3 weeks, which is the period of the getting to the point where the destruction of the temple becomes very imminent in history. That the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, of which is Tuesday of next week, it begins this period where, in history, when the Romans attacked the Second Temple, they broke down the wall of the city of Jerusalem, right, the city itself, the outer city, and entered into the city. From that point on, it was hand-to-hand combat, right, fighting to take over the city and destroy the temple. Up until that point, the Jews were able to keep them outside because Jerusalem has a wall. They couldn't get past the wall. Every time they go near the wall, they throw stuff at them, right? They couldn't get past it. Here, they were able to knock a hole in the wall and get in. That happened on the 17th day of Tammuz. On the Hebrew calendar is next week, and that's a fast day. And every day for the next 3 weeks, there's a certain amount of mourning because the destruction got worse and worse and worse until the 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av, which you probably heard of, which is a very important and very sad day, fast day, because it's the day that the temple was actually destroyed, where they actually won. They destroyed it, but not just the second temple, the first temple also, and not just the first temple, but also the story of the spies happened on that day. Many, many things happened on that day. The 9th day of Av is not a great day historically for the Jews, and it's a time of mourning. So we'll spend some time talking about that next week as well.